All right, welcome everyone. I'm Erin Driscoll. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Wilmington Memorial Library. I want to thank the libraries in Tewksbury, Andover, and North Reading for joining us to promote this program. We are in a Zoom webinar room tonight, so we will not see or hear you in the audience, but we do encourage you to participate and post any questions you have in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you shake your mouse, you'll see kind of the two speech bubbles there. That's where you can put your questions. And I'm very excited to welcome tonight's presenter, Lydia Blackmore. She is the Decorative Arts Curator at the Historic New Orleans Collection. She earned an MA and a certificate in Museum Studies from the Winterthur Program in American Material Culture at the University of Delaware. And she also holds a degree in history from the College of William and Mary. She has curated or co-curated several exhibitions, including Goods of Every Description, Shopping in New Orleans, 1825 to 1925, Pieces of History, 10 Years of Decorative Arts, Fieldwork, and of course, Making Mardi Gras. And with that, I will turn it over to Lydia.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak virtually to all of you about Mardi Gras, especially virtually because I don't want to go to where you are because it's very cold there, I imagine. And it's quite lovely and warm here in New Orleans this evening. This talk is related to the exhibition Making Mardi Gras, which opened at the Historic New Orleans Collection this January 6th and will run through May 8th, 2022. The exhibition celebrates the creativity of New Orleans Carnival, from huge parade floats to street costumes. The art of Mardi Gras weaves through the city, decorating private ballrooms, dangling from trees, and adorning neighborhood porches. Mardi Gras artists and makers craft extravagant creations from inexpensive materials, crown jewels from glass stones, headdresses from turkey feathers, and floats from styrofoam and paper mache. Creators put serious thought into their designs, drawing inspiration from history, literature, folklore, and popular culture. And these artists work year-round, some making their living, on masterworks only on view for a day. This exhibition and my talk tonight will share these art forms, explaining Mardi Gras to people who don't know and providing inspiration for those who do. So in case you didn't know, Mardi Gras was last week. It was on March 1st. Tuesday, March 1st, 2022 was Mardi Gras, and the whole city came out for a really beautiful day of celebration and release after these long 2 years that we've all had of pandemics and hurricanes. It was just so wonderful to be out on the streets with the city in costume, eating, drinking, dancing, and creating with everybody. So this is my family celebration of Mardi Gras. You can see I am there with the headdress. I recreated one of the costumes from the exhibition. That's my costume. That's my mother behind me. There's my little baby, my toddler and his best friend, and then at the end of the day, the stroller nap on the way home. So this is probably already busting one of your Mardi Gras myths. Mardi Gras is a family-friendly affair. This is right downtown in the streets of the French Quarter, where I took my children on Fat Tuesday. So we're going to learn a lot more about Mardi Gras if you don't know, if that was brand new information to you. And we'll learn a lot of the details as well. So Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday, sometimes called Shrove Tuesday, is the culmination of Carnival. That's the key thing. Mardi Gras is the day, Carnival is the season. It's like Christmas Day and Advent. But we use the term Mardi Gras interchangeably with Carnival a lot of the time. Beginning on January 6th, that's 12th night, or Epiphany, the 12th day of Christmas, that's when Carnival begins, and it runs until the Tuesday that is 40 days before Easter, plus Sundays. It has to do with Lent. So Carnival, Mardi Gras is the season of excess, sociability, and tradition before Lent, when we give up things. It is also a time of contradictions. Mardi Gras is a local celebration, but a tourist attraction. It is an adult party, but family friendly. It is a local celebration. It is free for the public, but fortunes are spent and made putting on the festivities each year. Anyone can participate in Mardi Gras, but access to private clubs or the crews that host balls and parades has historically been limited by wealth, race, sex, and social connection. Finally, spectators are also participants in Mardi Gras. With costuming, dancing, and singing, spectators help create the art that defines Carnival. Mardi Gras traditions and the art that goes into them reflect the complex layering of class, race, and cultural appropriation that has shaped the city since its founding. White male elites established the rituals of pageantry in the 19th century that African American, female, gay, and populist crews copied, parodied, altered, and expanded in the 20th century. 21st century newcomers have eagerly joined the crowd, finding their own ways to make their mark on this generation's old spectacle. In Mardi Gras, the adaptability, resiliency, and creativity of New Orleans culture is on full display. The traditional Catholic celebration of Carnival and Mardi Gras has been celebrated in Louisiana since 1699, when the first French imperialist soldiers set foot on the land at the mouth of the Mississippi River. That point of land is actually called Point du Mardi Gras, as they landed on Mardi Gras Day. Carnival masking was common throughout French and Spanish New Orleans. And one of the earliest descriptions of making Mardi Gras was in 1729 by a young French clerk named Marc-Antoine Caillot, who wrote in his journals about his carnival celebrations with his friends. He dressed up as a shepherdess. So that's the first documented example of cross-dressing in New Orleans Carnival. And he was leading his flock of friends on a parade through the colonial town, accompanied by musicians and enslaved flambeau torch carriers. After Caillot, everybody else was celebrating throughout the 18th and 19th century as well. Masquerade balls were de rigueur at that time. And you can see this is a masquerade that was published in Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper. It says it's for Washington's birthday, but Washington's birthday, being in mid-February, often falls around Mardi Gras as well. So this is probably a Mardi Gras or carnival ball. However, most histories of Mardi Gras in New Orleans start in 1857 with the origins of the mystic crew of Comus. A group of Anglo-American businessmen formed a secret club whose purpose was to hold a public parade and a private ball to celebrate Carnival, establishing the model for carnival organizations to follow. Crews are the private organizing force of Carnival. Typically named for ancient gods, kings, and cultures, crews, spelled K-R-E-W-E, proliferated through the 20th century, drawing from different interest groups and reflecting the changing social landscape of New Orleans. Not all crews produce parades for the public. There are many crews that just hold private mass balls. They're just private clubs. And they fill event halls, theaters, and ballrooms of the city nearly every weekend night of the carnival season. Some crews are secret, keeping their members' identities hidden, while others are open to anybody who wants to pay dues. The earliest formalized New Orleans carnival balls and parades carried forth by new crews of elite, white, Anglo-Saxon, and Creole men, imported their regalia and their ephemera from France. After all, that's where New Orleans culture originated. They depended on the scene shops, costume atelier, jewelers, and lithographers of Paris to carry out their visions of fantasy in elegant style. The beautiful die-cut invitations of the so-called golden age of Carnival, which I hope that we've all learned that anything called the golden age really wasn't that golden. But that age is loosely defined as the late 19th century running up to World War I. And these beautiful invitations from that period are the product of French printers. They're gorgeous not only in their shape, but also their illustration, capturing the design of the Belle Epoque and the skill of the lithographers. The earliest New Orleans Mardi Gras crews ordered their costumes, masks, tableau ornaments, and even papier-mâché parade elements from theatrical craftsmen in Paris. These papier-mâché masks were part of Comus's parade in 1878. As seen in this illustration from Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper, the Mystic crew ordered their French costumes through Alabam's Costume Depot in Camp Street, with all the papier-mâché float elements delivered to a nearby cotton warehouse that doubled as their den for float production. So you can see this is the head, one of the women's heads that this mask was used to represent. So look at these just like shipments of papier-mâché alligators coming from Paris to be loaded onto cotton carts to roll through the street as a parade. The earliest parades were more akin to moving tableau or moving plays, skits, depending on elaborately costumed performers rather than built-up floats. As you can see in this design from the 1871 Twelfth Night Revelers Parade, which was the theme was Mother Goose's Tea Party, the costume designs were papier-mâché creations. A few years later, the Twelfth Night Revelers performed Audubon and his creations, which with each member outfitted in a bird costume made by a Parisian theatrical costume shop. When Rex made his first appearance on Mardi Gras Day in 1872, wearing a borrowed costume from a local Shakespearean actor, he set the precedent for kingly costumes based on historical designs. Rex is the self-proclaimed king of Carnival, rolling on Mardi Gras Day, whereas Comus, who is the god of Carnival, rolled on Mardi Gras evening. Rex still rules the day today, in fact, celebrating their 150th anniversary just last week. But Rex's first costume in 1872 was borrowed from a local Shakespearean actor who was playing Richard III. But after that, they started importing their costumes from French atelier. And this bronze bejeweled breastplate and crown worn by John Poitevin as Rex in 1893 were made in Paris. And you can see his formal Rex King photograph here of him wearing that breastplate. He perched on his king's float behind the boeuf gras, the fatted cow of Carnival, and a tidal float. John Poitevin would have embodied the king of Carnival, leading his parade of fantasies. Parisian jewelers also produced the costume jewelry worn by Carnival queens and kings. And Carnival queens are usually debutantes, so young women coming out in society. Their costumes are not usually thematic. They are couture gowns representing the highest style of the time and as sparkly and glittery as possible. So you can see this suite of jewelry, which includes the crown, her necklace, a pair of armbands that are connected to bracelets. So it's an arm cuff that has a chain to a bracelet, And then this wonderful piece with the dangly bits is actually a girdle or a belt that she wore around her extremely tiny waist. And these were worn by Miss E. May Hart, who was Queen of Comus in 1909. She was 19 years old. The jewelry was designed by Jenny Wild, the lead designer for Comus at the turn of the 20th century. Wild's original designs are preserved at Tulane, and you can see that the French jeweler took some liberties with the original designs, but kept the primary pansy motif. The pansies were Miss Hart's favorite flower, and Jenny Wild, the designer, repeated them throughout the design for the parade, ball, and costumes, seen here in the designs for Comus's tunic, throne, and float. And so studying Mardi Gras, going back to those contradictions, Mardi Gras can be a very deep subject reflecting the context and the political feelings of New Orleans and society throughout the time, or it can be really shallow. And Comus was the leading businessman of the day, and this guy was decked out in pansies because it was a 19-year-old's favorite flower. So I just love that aspect of Mardi Gras. I don't know what's going on with this light. Back to what I was saying. Here's another queen's costume made for Mrs. Reuben Edgar Tipton, who was the queen of the Mystic Club in 1940. And I apologize if you hear a toddler screaming in the background. That's my life right now. But Mrs. Reuben Edgar Tipton wore this as the Queen of Mystic in 1940. The Mystic Club prides itself on accurately depicting its themes of historic rulers, in this case, the era of Cardinal Richelieu of Baroque France. So in this gown, Mrs. Tipton was dressed as Queen Anne, consort to King Louis XIII, at a ball thrown by the influential cardinal. The gold brocade fabric was made in France, and the sequined mantle, or her cape, which is about 16 feet long, was designed to resemble a stained glass window. Her king, dressed as Louis XIII, was General Kemper Williams, who was the founder of the Historic New Orleans Collection. Even into the mid-20th century, the wax canvas masks used by some of the historic crews were still imported from France. And you can see these different designs for wax masks here. Although production for early Mardi Gras was primarily abroad, the design was local. And this is the earliest known design by Charles Britton, the first known designer for the crews of Comus, Momus, Proteus, and Rex. Originally from Sweden, Britton moved to New Orleans in 1865 and worked with a local lithographer. He arrived just at the right time to shape the look of Carnival. His cartoonish artistry and wit created fanciful worlds and biting satire. So you can see from this costume design for a tobacco worm who strongly resembles President Ulysses S. Grant in 1873. When Britton died in 1884, Bror Anders Wickstrom, another Swede, assumed the mantle of designer for the knights, kings, and gods of Mardi Gras. Wickstrom had trained in art in Europe and sailed the world as a merchant marine and arrived in New Orleans in 1883. In addition to becoming the key creator for Rex, Wickstrom was at the center of the New Orleans Art Society. His designs are elegant and colorful, and I especially love his designs for female characters, knowing that they were all portrayed by men. Women designers dominated the carnival scene at the end of the 19th century and well into the 20th century. Carlota Bonacaz, a native New Orleanian from a prominent Creole family, designed for Proteus in the late 19th century. From 1891 to 1913, Jenny Wild captured the wild excess of the Gilded Age in Art Nouveau style in her float and costume designs for Comus and Momus. For 4 decades, beginning in 1902, Sanila Bauer Alexander provided exacting designs for the crew of Rex. Mrs. Alexander was known to fill the entire back side of her designs with notes about details, materials, and even specific movements that the wearers of her costumes should make. 3 graduates of Newcomb College, a local women's college best known for its art and pottery program, worked with the leading white crews of the 20th century, creating fanciful and adaptable designs to carry the crews through the lows of the Great Depression and Second World War. From her apartment in Jackson Square, Louis Andrews Fisher worked with Spangenberg Studios, a leading stage production company, to design floats, sets, and costumes for Mardi Gras. Leda Hinks Plauché was an accomplished commercial artist and brought her eye for marketing to her designs for the old line cruise. Alice Peake Reese brought her whimsical style to the Rex Parade and other ball crews, following the lead of her classmates. And actually, the grandson of Alice Peake Reese was Rex this year. Many other artists have contributed to the rich designs for Carnival. As the number of crews ballooned in the 20th century, designers, seamstresses, and amateurs across the city put watercolor, pencil, and marker to paper to plan out costumes. Float designs became more professionalized in the 20th century as well, going through the production companies that built floats. As a result, float shapes became a bit more standardized as companies reused the same chassis over and over for different crews. With over 50 parades per year and 45 floats per parade, float building in New Orleans is a year-round industry that employs scores of skilled artisans. A float must be sturdy and beautiful, able to support dozens of riders throwing beads, and prepared for all kinds of weather, while also conveying the artistic theme of the parade as it rolls past spectators. The bases for floats are often the most historic parts of the parade, with some originating as 19th century cotton carts or 20th century utility wagons. The architecture of the float is built up from the base, supporting 1 or 2 stories of riders who are strapped on the rolling vehicle with safety harnesses. Floats also have space for storing throws and refreshments, and sometimes even a hidden portable toilet. It's a long parade day and a lot of drinks. Sturdy fabric is stretched over the architecture of the float to provide the canvas for painted scenery. And the largest ornament on a float is the prop that sits in front. So you can see various prop sizes here and compared to the human maker next to her. The first professional float builder in New Orleans was Georges Soulier, a French immigrant sculptor and painter who specialized in papier mâché. Establishing his studio of artisans in 1877, Soulier brought the beautiful designs of Comus, Momus, Rex, and the Twelfth Night Revelers, and the funny 40 Fellows, all spelled with PH, to life with paper and paste in plaster molds. Soulier's son, Henry Soulier, took over the business in 1919, soon partnering with Harry Crasson. In turn, Soulier and Crasson taught other local artists the trade, creating a unique artistry of New Orleans float building. Royal Artists, led by Richard Valady, continues the tradition of papier-mâché float building today. And in fact, the 2 largest float builders in the city are part of a legacy of training that reaches back to Georges Soulier. In the 20th century, styrofoam became more common for props, with artists carving stacks of the material with butter knives. In the 21st century, some float builders, most notably Kern Studios, are experimenting with 3D printing, using high-tech robotics to carve styrofoam. Foam props are covered with a layer of papier mâché, and painters follow the modelers, bringing the forms to life with color and shading. The most durable and reusable props are cast in fiberglass to be used over and over again. Final decorative details on floats include gold foil, lights, and blooming pasteboard flowers attached all over the structure. In these photos, you can see the progress of the design for the Crew of Muses Goddessy float, from its computer model to sculpted styrofoam to the final glittering product. And here it actually is just 2 weeks ago when I saw it in the Muses Parade. Throughout the 20th century, seamstresses and tailors across the city have been busy year-round making Mardi Gras costumes. Of note were the Mrs. Stoos, who produced costumes for the historic crews for decades, based from their home on Esplanade Avenue. By the second half of the 20th century, cost, time, and numbers made it necessary for more standardized crew costumes. Instead of elaborate, individually designed outfits for a whole cast of parade and ball tableau performers, crews turned to local costumers to make suits of brightly colored, loose-fitting suits that could be embellished in a variety of ways to fit the theme. Known locally as the pajama style of costumes because they are so comfortable, these suits are comprised of a large tunic, pants with elastic waist, and a corresponding face mask and hat. The costume, the bright pink costume, was probably worn by a member of the crew of Bacchus and was produced by the prolific Bandana Costumes, established by Orlando Bandana, a Venezuelan immigrant tailor here in the city. And today, these costumes are still produced en masse. Some of them are shipped from China, but there's literally like a 5-story building downtown that's just full of costume shops for various crews. So it's big business. These white kid leather captain's boots were handmade for their anonymous wearer by the eccentric craftsman Calvin Days, also known as the Jive Ass Shoemaker. And I've just included that so I could say Jive Ass in this lecture. But he was a specialty shoemaker, and he would custom create the shoe lasts for each of his customer. And he was known to be quite touchy. So he would pin your check to your shoe last. And if you questioned him too much or you were late to your appointments, he would return your check to you instead of getting your boots. And trust me, you want these boots. They have rhinestones on the heels. Courtly fashions have grown flashier throughout the 20th century, from the Medici collars and feathered crowns, as seen sported by Comus and his queen in the 1960s. They've been adapted and expanded by new organizations, especially suburban, gay, and African-American crews. Although a historic crew, you can see the King Zulu, George Rainey, sporting one of the modern style wirework collars with his queen, his granddaughter, in 2019. These collars are made by the Colombo family, consisting of thousands of wire loops on a fan superstructure, each supporting feathers and sequined panels. Small gifts, tchotchkes, and treasures, which we call throws, have been given out by paraders since Santa Claus rode on the final float of the 1871 Mother Goose's Tea Party Parade with the 12th Night Revelers, handing out toys to children along the route. Other small gifts and toys were handed out after that, and by 1920, the crew of Rex required its parade riders to throw beads. The first beads were made of colorful glass imported from Czechoslovakia and Japan. Molded plastic beads made in China became more prevalent in the latter part of the 20th century with the rise of super crews, which are enormous crews with thousands of members. It has become a point of pride for crews to throw as much as possible, not only beads, but stuffed animals, go cups, which are plastic cups, and novelty toys. You can still catch glass beads at a parade and I collect them. I actually caught these glass beads this year. First designed by H. Alvin Sharp for the 1960 Rex Parade, doubloons were among the most highly sought throws of the late 20th century. These aluminum coins, cast with crew emblems and themes, clink on the pavement, sending collectors scrambling. Unique throws crafted by crew members have become the most desirable catches today, inspired by the painted coconuts that have been thrown by the crew of Zulu since the early 20th century. The crew of Muses introduced their signature decorated shoes in 2001. Since then, sunglasses, shrimp boots, toilet plungers, and other hand-decorated objects have flown through the air to open hands lining the parade route. And the scramble to catch one of these signature throws is quite dangerous. Sometimes you really, really want one of these throws. And if you visit New Orleans home, you may see a Muse's shoe proudly displayed on the mantelpiece or in the china cabinet. The signature throw is evidence of the DIY spirit of Mardi Gras and the evolution towards a more personalized, democratized, and sustainable celebration. So here you can see a Muse's shoe, and then also a golden poop throw from the crew of Barkus, which is a dog parade. There's a Mardi Gras for everybody. The scramble to catch throws turns parade spectators into participants. Attending a parade is an all-day event with food and drink, catching up with friends and family members. Unlike the wider perception of women flashing for beads, parades and throws are meant for families. In fact, the parade route is lined with artifacts just for children, parade ladders. Consisting of a basic box mounted on top of a ladder, these elevated seats raise children above the fray, keeping them safe from the crowds below and allowing them to catch the most beads and toys. We have this ladder in the exhibition, and somebody noted to me, you know, in most places, there's like a big sticker that says, don't step on the top of a ladder. And in New Orleans, you just put your kids up on top. To which I said, yep. And here is my toddler and my husband in their parade ladder this year. It is very successful in keeping him from running around and also in allowing him to catch as much stuff as possible. We have a lot of cheap toys in our house right now. Walking the streets of the city in unique costumes and carrying homemade floats, small marching crews are different from the larger float parades, and they embody the DIY spirit of Mardi Gras. These crews number in the dozens, providing an array of marching options for New Orleanians. If you can't find a marching crew that you like, you can just start your own. It's surprisingly easy to get a parade permit in New Orleans. The first parade of carnival season doubles as a birthday party for New Orleans patron saint Joan of Arc. The crew of Joan of Arc parades in medieval costumes, carrying props, puppets, and banners telling the story of Joan of Arc. Crew members create handmade throws, including wooden doubloons, matchbooks, and prayer cards to share the hagiography of the Maid of New Orleans. This birthday cake, made of cardboard and spray foam, leads the parade on its winding path through the French Quarter. January 6, 2022 marked the 610th birthday of Joan d'Arc. Known for their, and then the next picture here is of the Crew de Vue or Crew de Vue Carré, which is known for its satirical floats and quite a raunchy sense of humor. They parade through the French Quarter 3 weeks before Mardi Gras. It is one of the few carnival celebrations that is not suitable for children, and it's quite hard to find a photograph of this parade that is suitable for a museum exhibition because most of their floats include genitalia. When the COVID-19 pandemic put a halt to traditional Mardi Gras parades in 2021, New Orleanians found creative new ways to safely celebrate Carnival from home. A social media post by New Orleans resident Megan Boudreau invited people to decorate their houses as parade floats, launching the crew of house floats. The idea was wildly popular, and thousands of houses across the city were decorated by homeowners or artists that they hired. This was my favorite house float just down the street from my home. And then I was able to salvage one of the Lego men from the post-Ida trash pile for my personal collection. Professional Mardi Gras artists were able to make ends meet through the lean year through private work on house floats. The Hire a Mardi Gras Artist initiative, led by the crew of Red Beans, was a highly successful project, not only in hiring artists, but in raising awareness for supporting New Orleans artists through tough times. Founded in 2009, the Walking Crew of Red Beans celebrates and supports New Orleans' cultural community. Crew members use hot glue, multicolored beans, and rice to create mosaic tapestries from the staples of New Orleans cuisine. The walking parade takes place on the Monday of Mardi Gras week, which is called Lundi Gras, Mondays being the traditional day to eat red beans and rice. These costumes, this is a car that is entirely covered with hot glued red beans. And then this costume is on display in the exhibition. And you have to look really closely to realize that that's rice and beans making up that image. Like many examples of Mardi Gras artistry, craftsmanship, and showmanship, the crew of Red Beans is inspired by Mardi Gras Indians. Mardi Gras Indians, also called Black Masking Indians, are one of New Orleans' greatest cultural treasures, taking to the streets each year in brightly colored suits to continue a legacy of performance, parading, music, and craftsmanship that has been passed down for generations. The tradition was established by New Orleanians of African descent to honor their enslaved ancestors and the aid that they received from indigenous peoples. Here you can see Queen Cherise Harrison Nelson in her 2021 suit honoring Maroon ancestors. And the red suit by Chief Howard Miller of the Creole Wild West is on display in the exhibition. The suit combines beaded scenes of the early Zulu tramps, which is one of the early African American crews, as well as Native American turquoise bead accessories. And Chief Miller's specialty is his use of rhinestones, and this suit shines. It is an amazing artifact that stops you in your tracks, as it is bright red, 10 feet tall, and 6 feet wide. And Chief Miller makes a suit like this each year to wear for 3 days and dances all day long while wearing them. Here are some of the suits that were made this year by Chief Germain Bossier of the 7th Ward Creole Hunters, Chief Romeo Bougere of the 9th Ward Hunters, and Chief Victor Harris, the Spirit of Fayayay of the Mandingo Warriors. So you can see there's different styles across Indian gangs, which are mostly organized by neighborhood in the city. Indian suits seem dominated by their feathers, but the true artistry of them is in the hand-sewn beaded tapestries. Each Indian suit is composed of several sections with beaded decoration surrounded by colorful feathers and trim. The central hand-beaded tapestries depict historic and cultural scenes, animals, people, or abstract geometry, with styles varying by neighborhood gang. Each suit takes about a year to produce, but is only worn 3 times: on Mardi Gras Day, St. Joseph's Day, and the large gathering of tribes called Super Sunday, which takes place in March. This unfinished beadwork by Chief Gerald Page of the Great Spirit Warriors is on display in the exhibition. It shows the historic pictorial style of uptown Indians, honoring his grandfather who served as a Buffalo soldier in the 19th century. Black masking Indian traditions reach back to the 19th century, at least to the 1880s. The earliest suits were close copies of Plains Indian war bonnets, possibly inspired by Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, with plumage of undyed turkey feathers and beaded decoration with found materials. On the left is the earliest known photograph of Mardi Gras Indians in our holdings, showing a gang at the corner of Canal and Claiborne in 1915. The mid-20th century crowns had long tails that reached down to the ground and made with fringed sleeves and pants. In the 1980s, party bows trimmed shields and aprons. Like any art form, Mardi Gras Indian suits have changed in style over the decades, and style of Indian suits is constantly pushed forward in the quest for the prettiest display. I see a question has just come in. How heavy are the costumes, regalia, and headpieces? The full suit, Chief Miller's suit, weighs about 130 pounds. It's in several pieces. So that's quite heavy. It's spread out across his body. It's more awkward to work with because the crown is several feet high. But if you ask most Mardi Gras Indians, and when I asked Chief Howard, like, do you work out? Do you train to wear this suit all day long? They will say that it is a spiritual act putting on the suit. So that he does not notice the weight of it when he puts it on. Although he did follow up by saying that he lays down for about 3 days afterwards. He is in his late 60s, so that's quite a lot to wear and dance in for the day. Separate from Black masking Indians is the feminine baby doll tradition. Strutting the streets in frilly bloomers, smoking cigars, and flashing cash, baby dolls proclaim their sexuality and feminine power, originating in the streets of Black Storyville at the beginning of the 20th century. The first baby dolls were prostitutes. With names like the Gold Diggers, the $1 Million Baby Dolls, these women flaunted their value in a society that constantly devalued poor Black working women. There has been a revival of the baby doll tradition among women of all professions in recent decades, and baby dolls can be found throughout the city and throughout the year, strutting with Mardi Gras Indians or with second lines or dancing down parade routes. Other walking groups are all about the costumes. The intergalactic crew of Chewbacca's and its various subcrews celebrate sci-fi cosplay. The members of the Crew de Fleur strut as life-size flowers, and the spectacular maskers of the Society de Saint Anne snake through the French Quarter on a pilgrimage of revelry and remembrance each Mardi Gras day, ending with a somber salute at the Mississippi River. And that brings us to the core of New Orleans Mardi Gras, which is groups of friends, neighbors, relations, and other like-minded people coming together to celebrate and create. Whether it's a generations-old masking tradition, an organized crew, or just an informal group of friends, creativity, tradition, humor, and glitter, there's a lot of glitter, fill the air, inviting anybody to participate in the carnival season. So thank you very much. I am happy to answer any questions that have come in.
Thank you, Lydia. It looks like we do have a question in the chat. What do you do with all of the stuff that they throw that you catch? Do you display it? Do you pack it away?
What do we do? I've just finished processing all of the crap, all of the throws that came home with my children this year. There is a big recycling program in the city to recycle the plastic beads to be used by crews again in future years. So that's one thing to do. People do create art from beads. I donated a bunch of beads to an artist in the neighborhood who's making a big mosaic tile piece with beads. And then the junk throws, the toys. I mean, so I have a toddler or two toddlers. So we got a lot of footballs. We still play with a lot of footballs. I boxed up a lot of the toy throws, kind of to keep as backup toys throughout the year as rewards or party favors. The specialty throws, the shoes and the sunglasses and that sort of thing, people do display those in their homes. Or you just throw it away. It's there is a greater movement towards throws that can be used, or throws that are recyclable or biodegradable, because there is a fairly large environmental impact of all of the junk that is thrown from parades. But we're not getting rid of it because it's just such a fun element of being out on the parade route.
Sure, of course. Yes, we have a comment in the chat that said they have kept their beads from several years ago and have worn them to celebrate this year. One question I have, I didn't realize, so the celebration has a different theme every year. Is that right? For the whole?
No, not one theme for all of Mardi Gras.
Okay.
It's different themes for the different crews. So each parade has a theme, and there are like 20 parades. So that's 20 different themes. So it's decided by crew and organization. I did see a question in there about animals, I think. Animals and music. Is there any music? There's a lot of music. I don't think I have time to get into all of the music of Mardi Gras, but Mardi Gras Indians have a very specific music style that is just as important in the Mardi Gras Indian culture as the music as their suits are. Mardi Gras parades have lots of music to them, especially school marching bands that perform throughout the parade. It's my favorite part. There's a whole genre of Mardi Gras music. I should find and share the link to the Historic New Orleans collection page. We have quite a lot of information about Mardi Gras, obviously, available, but we also have a custom Spotify playlist made by a local DJ, so you can listen to all sorts of Mardi Gras music.
Excellent. And I'll be sending out a follow-up email to everyone that registered tonight, so I'll be sure to link to that page as well for people.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have a question from Suzanne, who went to the Mardi Gras parade about 10 years ago and was amazed to see that there were some marchers with natural gas backpacks that were fueling handheld gas lights. Are those still used? And what is the history of those?
So those are flambeaux. Those torches are called flambeaux, and the carriers are flambeau carriers. It is a very historic practice in carnival celebrations. I mean, Marc-Antoine Caillot had enslaved flambeaux for his parade. But those gas torches have been used since the 19th century Mardi Gras. I mean, if you think of night parades in the 19th century, there's the need a light source. So that they used to be the only light source. Now there are flambeaux in about 8 parades, kind of as a legacy, a tradition that has continued. Yes, it does seem quite dangerous to carry. The traditional flambeau torch is kind of a T-shaped torch with the kerosene container up at the top. So it's gravity-fed kerosene with lights above it. So you often see kind of drips of kerosene flying off. And the flambeau carriers will dance and collect tips along the parade route. So that's just one of the many traditions of Mardi Gras parades.
Angela has a question. Is there a formal program listing for all the parades and the crews? Like, how do you know what times and where they're walking?
So there are several Mardi Gras guides published each year. The best go-to guide is Arthur Hardy's Mardi Gras Guide, where it will list the parade schedule, and that's for the crew float parades. Plus, Arthur Hardy is an expert in Mardi Gras, so he provides all sorts of context and history. There are local parade tracking apps. So those have the parade schedules in them, and then you can actually track where they are along the route. So yes, there's lots of information you can find out to plan parades. Now, you cannot plan to find Mardi Gras Indians. Their routes are never announced ahead of time. Mardi Gras Indians go where they want to go, and you have to happen upon them.
See, there's a question. How far north do they celebrate Mardi Gras? I don't know if they mean north in the city or north in the country.
Well, Mardi Gras is part of Carnival, so it is celebrated in most Catholic areas. So, I mean, New Orleans Mardi Gras is certainly specific to New Orleans, but there are Carnival celebrations, you know, about Rio, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Venice has a great carnival. Nice has a great carnival. If you're asking about in the US, I think St. Louis has a Mardi Gras, but I've never been, nor will I ever be, because I'm going to be here for Mardi Gras. Yeah.
Oh, and they clarified it, said they meant in the US. So
yeah.
Sounds like St. Louis may be the answer. Right, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Let's see. A lot of my questions have been answered. I was wondering how heavy those costumes were.
Yeah, the Mardi Gras Indian costumes are amazing.
One last thing I noticed from your talk is you had mentioned that the grandson of one of the early float designers, Alice P. Reese, was Rex this year. It sounds like there are some sort of Mardi Gras legacies in families. Is that common?
Oh, yes. Yes, especially with high society, rich white Mardi Gras. It is very genetic. They can trace their genealogies through different crews and kings and queens. And especially with an organization like Rex or Comus, many of the chosen monarchs have their fathers were that monarch, their grandfathers were that monarch. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lydia. I know I learned a ton. I will send a follow-up email linking to the Historic New Orleans Collection website page for Making Mardi Gras. And I think I'll be listening to that Spotify playlist on my drive home this evening. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, I did just post the link in the chat if you want to look at that. There's all sorts of programming and lectures coming out throughout the run of the exhibition. But yes, the playlist is a great playlist, and it has been playing in my house for months now. There's one last question that came in. Do local kid groups help build floats like in the Rose Bowl parade, Girl Scouts, or all professional? Crew floats are professionally built floats. I mean, all props to the Rose Bowl parade, but we take our parades very seriously here in New Orleans. No, but there is the phenomenon of the truck parades, which is kind of a loosely organized parade that follows Rex on Mardi Gras of individual families creating floats on truck beds. So that is a more child-centric parade. Also, I didn't include it in the presentation, but like schools have Mardi Gras parades. My kids, I did a wagon float for the daycare parade. So there are many ways to create for children. And traditional craft for a New Orleans child is the shoebox float. So you make your own little float out of a shoebox.
Oh, that sounds very cute. One last question. Have you still seen some of those kind of house float decorations this year?
House floats did continue this year. I made my own half-assed attempt. It was not quite as widespread as it was last year because people had other things happening. But there were some great crew of house floats pieces out there.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Lydia, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Have a great night.
Thank you.